If you've been scrolling through endless spec sheets, watching video after video trying to decide which high-end laptop actually gives you something you can feel in real life, you're not alone. The market is full of eye-catching numbers, and it's easy to end up buying a machine that looks great on paper but leaves you wishing you'd spent a little more research time. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent the last week swapping between a couple of different 16-inch gaming rigs, testing a few creative apps, and even dabbling in a small AI model inference project to see where the Lenovo IdeaPad Pro 5 actually lands in the day-to-day grind. What I found is that this laptop does a lot of things well, but it also carries some trade-offs that become obvious once you start using it beyond the bench test hype. First off, the display. Lenovo went with a 2.8K OLED panel that can push 120 Hz, and that's not just a marketing bullet. In a real-world gaming session of Elden Ring, the deep blacks and vibrant colors let you spot enemies in dark corners that a traditional LCD would swallow. The 120 Hz refresh means that fast-paced shooters feel smoother, and the touch capability adds a layer of flexibility for Photoshop or DaVinci Resolve when you're on the go. I tried drawing a quick concept sketch with the stylus, and the latency was low enough that it felt natural, not jittery. For anyone whose workflow leans on accurate color and the occasional pen-based edit, this screen is a genuine productivity win. Under the hood, the Intel Core Ultra 9285H is a 16-core beast split between performance, efficiency, and low-power cores. In practice, the turbo up to 5.4 GHz burst shows up when you launch a heavy IDE like Visual Studio and start compiling a sizable C++ project. The build times dropped noticeably compared to a mid-range laptop I tested earlier. The real kicker, though, is the built-in AI acceleration that Intel markets with this chip. I ran a small text generation model using the OpenAI API locally, and the inference time was roughly 30% faster than on a comparable Ryzen 7 setup. If you're experimenting with AI tools or need that extra edge for video upscaling, the chip's AI cores start to feel like a purposeful addition rather than a gimmick. Graphics-wise, the RTX 5050 with 8GB of GDDR7 memory isn't the top-tier RTX 40 series, but it punches above its weight for a 16-inch chassis. In Fortnite, I was consistently pulling 90+ FPS at 1440p with medium-high settings, which is plenty smooth on a 120 Hz OLED. The card also handled Adobe Premiere's GPU-accelerated effects without stutter, meaning you can edit 4K footage and still get reasonable render times. For casual gamers who want a solid, future-proofed experience without stepping into the $2,500+ tier, this GPU hits a sweet spot. Now let's talk memory and storage. The laptop ships with 32GB of LPDDR5x 8400 RAM, soldered directly onto the board. That amount of memory is more than enough for multitasking, running multiple VMs, or training small neural nets. The downside? Since it's soldered, you can't upgrade later if you suddenly need 64GB. The 1TB PCIe 4.0x4 SSD feels spacious for a developer's toolkit, a game library, and a few media projects, and the sequential read/write speeds are quick enough that loading large project files is barely noticeable. However, the M.22242 form factor is a bit unusual if you ever plan to replace the drive. You'll need a specific size, which could limit third-party options. Connectivity is another area where Lenovo tries to future-proof. Wi-Fi 7 support means lower latency and higher throughput when you're in a compatible network, which translates to smoother cloud gaming sessions or faster file transfers to a NAS. In my tests on a Wi-Fi 6 router, the laptop still topped out at gigabit speeds, so the benefit is more about being ready for the next generation of routers rather than a current game-changing advantage. The downside is the port selection. There's a single USB-C with Thunderbolt 4, a couple of USB-A ports, and an HDMI 2.1 output, but no dedicated Ethernet port. If you rely on wired connections for stable ping, you'll need an adapter. Battery life is where the trade-off becomes more apparent. The OLED panel, while gorgeous, draws more power than an LCD, especially at higher brightness. In my typical workday mix of coding, video editing, and a bit of gaming, the laptop hovered around 4 to 5 hours before I had to plug back in. That's acceptable for a desktop replacement machine that you intend to keep near a power source, but it's a red flag for anyone who expects a full day of unplugged mobility. So, who should actually consider buying the Lenovo IdeaPad Pro 5? If you are a content creator who needs an accurate, high-refresh display for both video work and occasional sketching, the OLED touchscreen is a major draw. Gamers who want a portable machine that can handle modern titles at 1440p with smooth frame rates will appreciate the RTX 5050 and the 120Hz panel. Professionals dabbling in AI, machine learning, or heavy compile workloads will notice the advantage of the Ultra 9's hybrid cores and AI acceleration. In